Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going back to ancient India.
Ooh.
A period that's super important if you're one of those UPSC aspirants out there prepping for the GS1 ancient history section.
Right.
But even if you're not, who doesn't love a good history lesson about India?
Absolutely.
Before we get started, a quick reminder to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on future episodes.
Right.
Now you've sent in some amazing sources
I know.
on the early Vedic period, plus all these major foreign invasions that really shaped India's destiny.
It's fascinating stuff.
To help make sense of it all, we've got our expert here.
Hello.
Someone who is amazing at connecting the dots and explaining not just what happened, but why.
That's the fun part.
Are you ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
Okay, so to set the stage, we're going to start with a super quick overview of the early Vedic period.
Okay.
Kind of like laying the groundwork before all the action kicks off.
Right.
This period's a big deal
Go.
because it's basically where Indian society, religion, and culture as we know it began to take shape.
Exactly.
It's like the foundation of everything that comes after.
And it's from that foundation that we can understand why India became this huge target for foreign ambitions over and over again.
Right.
It's this recurring theme throughout history. And it really makes you wonder, why India?
Yeah.
What made it so irresistible?
It's like everyone was trying to get a piece of the action.
Oh,
What was so special about ancient India that everyone wanted in?
Think of it this way.
All right.
Imagine a land with incredibly fertile plains, a ton of valuable resources, and a location that's right smack dab in the middle of all the major trade routes.
Ooh.
That's ancient India.
Wow.
It was this powerhouse of agriculture, a source for all sorts of coveted goods, and a gateway between East and West.
So it was like the Silicon Valley of the ancient world.
You got it.
Everyone wanted to be where the wealth and opportunity.
Keywords.
So it's totally understandable why any leader with ambition would see India as this land ripe for the taking.
It makes sense.
And one of the earliest examples of this is the Arab conquest of Sindh back in the 8th century AD. This is when Islam is spreading.
Right.
The Arab Empire is expanding like crazy.
Huge.
And they've got their sights set on those juicy trade routes connecting the Mediterranean with the Indian Ocean.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just about the money, was it?
Not entirely.
There's got to be more to the story.
There is.
What else is going on?
Well, you're absolutely right.
Okay.
While the wealth of India was a huge factor, the first Arab invasion led by Muhammad bin Qasim was actually triggered by something a little more immediate: revenge.
Revenge.
Yeah, Arab ships had been plundered by pirates hanging out near Dibol, which is modern-day Karachi.
So it started as protecting their trade interests.
In a way.
And then escalated from there.
That's right.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But here's something that always trips me up. Qasim's rule in Sindh was super short-lived.
I know.
Like only 2 years.
Right.
You'd think after all the effort to conquer,
Yeah.
they'd want to stick around a while.
You would think so.
What happened?
Well, it's definitely interesting. While Qasim's reign was brief, the Arab presence in Sindh was still a big deal.
Oh?
Yeah, it led to Arabs settling in the region,
Okay.
tons of cultural exchange happening,
Interesting.
and basically set the stage for all the interactions between India and the Islamic world that would come later.
So even though it was short, it kind of planted the seeds for bigger changes down the road.
Exactly.
And speaking of big changes, that brings us to the Turks.
Ooh.
Specifically, Mahmud of Ghazni in the 11th century. Now, this guy was a total force of nature.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
I mean, I've read so much about him.
Mahmud of Ghazni was this incredible military leader who rose to power in what is now Afghanistan.
Wow.
And unlike the Arabs who settled in Sindh, Ghazni's main goal was straight up plunder.
Really?
He wasn't interested in building an empire in India. He was after the riches.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And he definitely found them.
He did.
I remember reading about the insane loot he took from the Somnath temple.
It's legendary.
We're talking about an unimaginable amount of wealth.
The scale of his plunder was mind-blowing.
It's hard to even fathom.
I know.
And even though his focus was on filling his treasury,
Yeah.
Ghazni's constant raids had a huge impact.
They did.
What were the long-term consequences of that?
Well, they basically exposed all these weaknesses in Indian defenses.
Oh, no.
Which unfortunately paved the way for future invaders who actually wanted to stick around.
Oh, so Ghazni's raids were like a reconnaissance mission.
You could say that.
He didn't mean to,
Right.
but he showed everyone where India was vulnerable.
Exactly.
And one guy who totally took advantage of those vulnerabilities was Muhammad of Ghor,
Oh, yeah.
who enters the scene in the 12th century AD with a whole new set of goals.
He did.
All right, this is where things get really interesting.
It does.
Ghori wasn't just some raider looking for loot. He wanted to carve out a place for himself in India permanently.
Ambitious.
He was a totally different kind of conqueror.
Yeah.
He had a whole strategy,
Right.
moving from Multan to Punjab and ending up in the super important battles of Terrain.
Those are key.
The battles of Terrain are like a major turning point in Indian history.
Oh, they are.
It's this crazy story of back and forth where Ghori loses the first battle against Prithviraj Chauhan,
Surprising defeat.
but then comes back in the second one and scores a decisive victory.
Yeah.
Talk about a historical cliffhanger.
I know, right?
Prithviraj Chauhan winning that first battle must have sent shockwaves through Ghori's forces.
Absolutely.
But this guy was persistent.
Oh, yeah. He was determined.
So what happened in that second battle?
Well, in that second battle in 1192 AD,
Okay.
he totally outmaneuvered the Rajput forces.
Wow.
This moment marks the beginning of Turkish rule in northern India.
Wow.
It's a massive shift in power in the region.
It's like setting off a chain reaction.
It is.
One victory leads to another, and the whole political landscape is changed forever.
It's how empires are built.
But just when you think things might calm down, India gets hit with yet another wave of invasions.
Oh, no.
This time from the Mongols and Timur in the 13th and 14th centuries.
Right.
The Mongols, led by different leaders, including some of Genghis Khan's successors, launched attack after attack on India over decades.
Yeah, they were relentless.
And they were known for being incredibly fierce and effective in battle.
They were a force to be reckoned with.
From what I've read, the Delhi Sultanate, under rulers like Balban and Alauddin Khilji, put up a pretty amazing fight against them.
They did.
They weren't going to go down without a struggle.
Definitely not.
But one event that really stands out for its brutality is the sacking of Delhi by Timur in 1398 AD.
Oh, yeah.
It was this devastating event that really weakened the Delhi Sultanate.
It was a major blow.
It's incredible how India faced wave after wave of these invasions.
It is.
But despite all that, it always adapted and eventually reasserted its own identity.
Yeah.
That says something about how resilient Indian culture is
It does.
and how it can absorb and blend influences.
It's a remarkable story of survival.
And that brings us to the beginning of the Mughal era in the 16th century with the arrival of Babur.
Nah, Babu.
This wasn't just another invader.
No, he wasn't.
This was a descendant of Timur.
Right.
And he had big ambitions to build a whole dynasty in India.
He did.
Babur's story is wild because it was actually driven by a lot of internal conflicts happening within India.
Yeah.
He was invited to invade by disgruntled Afghan chiefs
Really?
and even the Rajput king Rana Sanga,
Wow.
who wanted to use him to their advantage against Ibrahim Lodi.
Interesting.
So it was almost like they paved the way for him.
In a way.
Yeah, India's political scene was a mess at the time,
Yeah.
with different factions fighting for power.
Right.
It was the perfect opportunity for someone like Babur to exploit the chaos, and he did a fantastic job of it, especially in the Battle of Panipat in 1526 AD.
That was a decisive battle.
That battle changed everything.
It did.
Babur, even though he had a smaller army, used brilliant tactics and gunpowder technology to crush Ibrahim Lodi's forces.
That's right.
This basically ended the Lodi dynasty and laid the foundation for Mughal rule in India.
Panipat followed by his win at Kanwa against a Rajput confederacy.
Wow.
Cemented Babur's position as the top dog in India.
He really solidified his power.
He did.
These victories marked the start of a whole new chapter in Indian history,
Yeah.
the beginning of the Mughal era, which shaped the subcontinent for centuries.
That's an incredible legacy.
It's wild how this whole story unfolds, from the allure of India to the motivations and strategies of all these invaders.
It is.
It makes you realize that history isn't just about memorizing dates and names.
No.
It's about understanding the complex forces that shape a nation's destiny,
Right.
especially for those upcoming UPSC exams.
Good luck to all the aspirants out there.
Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground today.
We have.
We started with the early Vedic period, which laid the foundation for Indian society,
Right.
and went through all these invasions that challenged its resilience.
Yeah.
We've traveled through centuries, seen empires rise and fall, and explored what made India so attractive to conquerors.
It really is a fascinating story.
All right, listeners, before we jump into the lasting impacts of these invasions, I want to hear from you.
Yeah, let's hear it.
What stood out to you from what we've discussed so far? Which invasion was the most interesting?
Yeah.
Whose story really grabbed your attention?
I'm curious to know.
Let us know in the comments below.
We love hearing from you.
Make sure you stick around for the next part of our deep dive, where we're going to dig into how these invasions changed India's culture and politics in the long run.
It's going to be good.
Trust me, you won't want to miss it.
I can't wait.
Okay.
Welcome back.
All right.
Last time we left off with Babur kicking off the Mughal era.
Right. A whole new dynasty.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now let's shift gears a little
Yeah.
and look at the long-term consequences of all these foreign invasions.
Okay.
Not just the political changes,
Right.
but how they rippled through Indian society and culture.
The aftershocks.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe even shaped how we see ourselves today.
It's all connected.
It's like we're trying to understand the aftershocks of a historical earthquake.
I like that.
We've seen how these invasions redrew the political map, but what about their impact on everyday life? On the beliefs and customs of the people?
Right.
This stuff is still relevant to us even centuries later.
Absolutely.
It's not ancient history.
It's part of who we are.
Okay, so where do we even begin?
Well, one of the biggest and most obvious impacts was the introduction and spread of Islam in India.
Right.
We talked about the Arab conquest of Sind back in the 8th century,
Right.
which was kind of like this early point of contact between India and the Islamic world.
But it wasn't until those Turkish invasions, starting with Mahmud Ghazni and then Muhammad Ghori, that Islamic influence really started to take root in northern India.
That's a key point.
What changed?
Well, it's important to remember that this wasn't just about military dominance.
Okay.
It was also about cultural exchange.
Yeah.
When those Turkish rulers established themselves in India, they brought their customs, their traditions, and, of course, their faith.
So those ideas started to spread.
Exactly.
And that led to certain regions, especially in the north, gradually becoming more Islamized.
Right.
So it wasn't like this overnight transformation,
No.
but more of a gradual process.
Yeah.
Kind of like how water slowly reshapes the landscape over time.
That's a great analogy.
It wasn't a sudden flood. It was more...
There's this complex mix of factors at play.
What kind of factors?
Sometimes it was politically motivated.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was about economic opportunities.
Right.
And sometimes it was genuine conversion, often inspired by Sufi saints and preachers who did a lot to spread Islamic teachings.
It makes sense that religion would travel along those trade routes. And conquering armies.
It's like this cultural ripple effect.
But what about the impact on India's existing religious landscape?
Right.
Hinduism was the dominant faith. How did it react to this new presence?
That's a great question.
What happened?
And it gets to the heart of how different cultures interact and adapt. The relationship between Hinduism and Islam in India is super fascinating, and there's no easy answer.
Okay.
Sometimes there was conflict and pushback,
I bet.
especially from Rajput kingdoms who fought hard to protect their traditions.
Like that epic clash between Prithviraj Chauhan and Muhammad Ghori at the Battles of Touraine.
Exactly.
That was more than just a battle for land.
It
It was a clash of two very different worldviews.
Right.
But alongside that conflict,
Yeah.
you also see a surprising amount of assimilation and blending of ideas.
You do. Think about the Bhakti movement, which really gained momentum during this period. It emphasized personal devotion to God, going beyond the strict rituals and social hierarchies that had become so rigid.
Oh, yeah. I remember learning about those Bhakti saints.
Yeah.
Like Kabir and Mirabai. Their message of love and devotion resonated with people, regardless of their religious background.
That's the key.
Everyone could connect with it.
The Bhakti movement was, in a lot of ways, a direct response to the changing religious landscape.
It was.
It was about revitalizing Hinduism, making it more accessible to everyday people.
So it's trying to adapt.
And it did that by actually taking inspiration from Islamic ideas
Wow.
about monotheism and the equality of all believers.
So instead of just a clash of civilizations, it was more like this cultural fusion.
That's a good way to put it.
It's amazing how two very different belief systems could influence each other.
Yeah, if you look at the architecture from this period, you see this beautiful blend of Hindu and Islamic styles.
Really?
Yeah, in structures like the Qutub Minar in Delhi or the Adhai Din Ka Janpur Mosque in Ajmer.
Those are incredible examples.
They are.
It's amazing how buildings can reflect the cultural mixing of different groups.
It's true.
It's like history written in stone.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, so it wasn't just religion.
No.
This fusion wasn't limited to architecture.
It wasn't.
It
It influenced music, literature, and even cuisine.
Oh yeah, the food.
The Mughal period in particular was this golden age for Indo-Islamic art and culture.
I mean, think about those amazing miniature paintings.
Beautiful.
The majestic Mughal gardens.
So peaceful.
And of course, the delicious Mughal cuisine that we still love today.
Right?
Okay. But who doesn't love a good biryani or butter chicken?
So good.
It's like a tasty reminder of that cultural exchange.
But it's also important to acknowledge that this fusion wasn't always peaceful and seamless.
Right.
There are times of tension and conflict, especially when rulers tried to impose their own beliefs on others.
Right, like when some rulers destroyed temples, which is still a very sensitive topic today.
Exactly.
It's important to remember those parts of history, too.
We can't shy away from the darker sides of history.
Right, even if they're difficult to talk about.
Yeah.
So the story of foreign invasions in India is this incredibly complex tapestry.
It is.
Woven with threads of conflict, adaptation, and cultural exchange.
It's messy. It's fascinating.
It is.
And it's shaped who we are as a nation.
So let's bring us back to today.
Okay.
How do these events from centuries ago shape the India we live in?
Well, they've left this indelible mark on our cultural identity.
In what way?
The incredible diversity of languages, religions, and traditions we see in India is a direct result of these historical interactions.
Right.
We're a nation built on the confluence of so many different cultures.
It's like a reminder that India's story isn't this straight line,
No.
but a tapestry woven from all these different threads.
It is.
And understanding those threads helps us make sense of who we are. It helps us understand our complex past and how it's led to the richness and diversity of our present.
Exactly.
It's like piecing together this giant historical puzzle.
It is.
And each invasion, each interaction adds another piece to the picture.
Right.
And speaking of puzzles, one of the biggest legacies of these invasions was the introduction of new political systems and administrative structures.
Oh, yeah.
That's a whole other layer to unpack.
It is.
Welcome back, listeners.
Yay.
We're in the final stretch of our deep dive.
I know. I can't believe it.
And in this last part, we're shifting focus to how those foreign invasions totally reshaped the political landscape of ancient India.
Right.
Get those thinking caps on,
Yeah.
especially if you're prepping for the UPSC, because this stuff is gold for the GS1 ancient history section.
Absolutely.
So much to learn.
It's wild to think about how these invasions didn't just bring new rulers,
Right.
but they also introduced these totally new systems of governing and administration that left this lasting mark on India.
It's like they came in with their own playbook and said, all right, here's how we do things.
Right.
But I'm guessing it wasn't just a simple copy-paste situation.
Not at all.
India's always had a way of adapting and making things its own.
You're absolutely right.
So how did that play out?
It was a process of taking those new ideas and blending them with existing systems.
Okay.
A great example is the administrative systems introduced by the Delhi Sultanate.
The Delhi Sultanate.
Yeah, which came about after Muhammad Ghori's conquest.
Right.
They brought with them this idea of a centralized administration that really emphasized collecting revenue.
Ah, taxes.
So true.
The one constant throughout history, no matter who's in charge.
But the way they structured their revenue system was actually pretty innovative for its time.
Really?
They introduced this thing called the ecosystem.
The ecosystem.
Yeah, where they gave land grants to military commanders in exchange for their service.
Okay.
And the responsibility of collecting taxes from those lands.
So it's kind of like a feudal system.
Well, you could say that.
Where loyalty and military service were rewarded with land and the power to collect taxes.
Exactly.
And did it work?
And this system, while it definitely had its flaws, did bring a degree of stability and allowed the Sultanate to expand its control over these massive territories.
Okay, so it wasn't perfect?
No system ever is.
But it got the job done.
It did for a time.
I can see how these systems, even though they were designed to benefit the rulers, would have had ripple effects throughout society.
Oh, yeah.
Did those changes reach the everyday lives of regular people?
Absolutely.
How so?
Well, the Aita system, for example, created this whole new class of landed aristocracy who had a lot of power and influence.
Right.
That, in turn, affected the social hierarchy and the relationship between the ruling class and the peasants.
It's like a chain reaction. You
Yeah.
change things at the top and it trickles all the way down through society.
Exactly.
But let's not forget about the Mughals.
Oh, right. The Mughals.
They were famous for having this incredibly organized administrative structure,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
I mean, I've read so much about it.
The Mughals, especially under emperors like Akbar,
Yeah.
took that centralized administrative system and made it even more refined and powerful.
Wow.
They created this hierarchy with the emperor at the top, followed by provincial governors,
Yeah.
district officials, and village headmen.
It sounds like a well-oiled machine
And what?
designed to manage a huge empire.
They were very sophisticated for their time.
I bet.
They introduced a standardized revenue system,
Okay.
a solid judicial system,
Wow.
and even a postal service.
A postal service.
Yep.
Back in the 16th century.
That's right.
That's seriously impressive.
It shows how these empires weren't just about conquering.
Right.
They were also focused on setting up efficient systems of governance.
They were building something that would last.
Precisely.
And did it.
And those administrative structures, while they've obviously evolved over time,
Yeah.
actually laid the groundwork for many of the institutions we see in India today.
That's amazing.
The idea of a centralized bureaucracy,
Mm-hmm.
a hierarchical revenue system,
Right.
even the concept of a unified legal code,
Mm-hmm.
all of that can be traced back to these empires.
So even though these empires started with invasion and conquest,
Yeah,
they ended up contributing to the administrative DNA of modern India.
it's true.
History's full of these unexpected twists and turns.
It keeps us on our toes.
So as we wrap up this incredible deep dive,
Okay.
what's the key takeaway you want to leave our listeners with?
I'd say this. The history of foreign invasions in India isn't just a story about who won and who lost.
Well.
It's about resilience, adaptation,
Yeah.
and this amazing ability of Indian society to take in new influences and make them its own.
Right.
It reminds us that our identity as a nation is the product of centuries of interactions,
Yeah.
both peaceful and chaotic,
Yeah.
that have shaped us into the diverse and vibrant country we are today.
So well said.
Thank you.
It reminds us that history isn't just something we read in textbooks.
Right.
It's woven into our culture, our traditions, and even our political system.
It's all around us shaping our present.
Exactly.
And as you continue exploring history, whether for the UPSC or just for your own curiosity, remember to look beyond the battles and the conquests.
Yeah.
Explore those deeper currents of cultural exchange adaptation and the incredible resilience of the human spirit.
What an inspiring way to end our deep dive.
It's been a journey.
A huge thank you to our expert for guiding us through this incredible journey through ancient India.
My pleasure.
It's been amazing having you here.
Thanks for having me.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this adventure. We hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and inspired you to keep exploring the rich and complex history of this incredible nation. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. Until then, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.